The envelope had been sitting in my winter coat pocket for 3 weeks. I knew exactly what was inside: a single index card with an address, a phone number, and a name written in my own handwriting. I'd memorized it the night I wrote it, then told myself I didn't need it. I told myself that every single day, until the morning my husband stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching me get dressed, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done anything at all, without being watched. It didn't start this way. I want you to understand that, because if it had started this way, I would have left on day one. That's what everyone thinks. That's what I used to think too, before it happened to me. My husband, Gerald, and I met at a church potluck in Raleigh, North Carolina, the summer I turned 28. He was tall and steady and laughed at my jokes even when they weren't funny. We got married 11 months later in my mother's backyard under a string of white lights, and I thought I was the luckiest woman in the state. I was a registered nurse. I had my own savings account, my own car, my own friends, my own life. I was Eleanor Marsh, and I knew exactly who I was. For the first 20 years, the marriage was real. Not perfect. Gerald had a temper, and I had a stubborn streak wide as the Piedmont, but real. We raised 2 sons. We bought a house in Greensboro. We survived a miscarriage and a layoff and a flood that ruined our basement twice. We were partners. That's the word I would have used. Partners. Then Gerald's company downsized, and he was let go at 59, and something in him shifted in a way I didn't have words for yet. He said it was temporary. A few months of rest, then he'd find something new. I was still working full shifts at the hospital, pulling 12-hour days on the orthopedic floor. I didn't mind carrying us for a while. That's what partners do. But the months stretched, and Gerald didn't look for work. Instead, he started paying very close attention to me. Eleanor, why do you need a second cup of coffee at the nurse's station? You already had one before you left. Eleanor, your coworker Karen called the house phone. Why is she calling the house? What do you two talk about? Eleanor, the gas receipt says you stopped at the station on Elm Street. That's not on your way home. Where did you go? I explained every time. I always explained. The coffee was free. Karen was covering my shift next Tuesday. I needed air in my tires. I explained because I had nothing to hide, and because explaining seemed to make him calmer, and because I believed that was what a good wife did. But explanations only satisfied him for a day, sometimes less. He needed more. He always needed more. By the time I turned 61, he had taken over the household finances entirely. He said I was too tired from work to deal with the stress of bills. He said he was doing me a favor. He moved our joint accounts into a single account with only his name. He told me my paycheck, which had been directly deposited into my own account for 31 years, should go into the household account now, since we were a family and family share. I agreed because I was tired and because I still believed this was a phase, an adjustment, the tail end of a wound I didn't fully understand yet. He gave me a debit card with a weekly limit of $60 for personal expenses. $60 for anything that wasn't groceries, which he bought himself because he said I didn't. Comparison shop properly. Do you know what $60 a week feels like when you were a 61-year-old woman who spent 3 decades building a professional life? It feels like a leash, a very specific, very tight leash. I stopped meeting my friend Donna for dinner on Thursday nights. I stopped buying the good hand lotion that kept my skin from cracking during dry winters. I stopped getting my hair cut at the salon where Renee had done it for 15 years and started cutting it myself in the bathroom mirror with fabric scissors. Every small thing I gave up felt like something being removed from me piece by piece, so quietly I barely heard it happening. Gerald monitored my phone, not secretly, openly, as if it were completely normal. He'd pick it up from the counter while I was making dinner and scroll through my texts. If I called my son David in Charlotte, Gerald would be in the room within 2 minutes. asking who I was talking to, listening to both sides of the conversation. I started calling David from the hospital during my breaks, standing in the stairwell between floors, speaking in low voices like we were hiding something, when all we were really doing was being a mother and son. I stopped calling as often. It was easier. My younger son, Paul, lived in Phoenix. He called less frequently anyway, busy with his own life, his own kids. Gerald had always had a difficult relationship with Paul, something old and unresolved between them that I'd spent years navigating. After the layoff, when Gerald's moods became unpredictable, Paul stopped calling the house altogether. I didn't blame him, but I missed him in a way I couldn't explain to anyone. The hospital was the only place I still felt like myself. 12 hours on that floor, and I was Eleanor Marsh, RN, 31 years of experience, someone whose opinion mattered, whose hands were capable, who patients asked for by name. Then I came home, and I was someone else, something smaller. I told myself I was managing. I told myself it wasn't that bad. Gerald had never hit me. I want to be clear about that. He never raised a hand. And so for a long time, I held that fact up like a shield against my own understanding. It's not abuse if there are no bruises. That's what I believed. That's what I've been taught to believe. Even as a nurse who had seen the documentation of other kinds of harm, I could not apply the same knowledge to my own life. The morning everything changed was a Tuesday in February. I was due at work for a 7 a.m. shift. Gerald had been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with a coffee and the tablet he used to monitor our account activity. He'd taken to doing this, reviewing every transaction every day before I left for work. Eleanor. He said my name, the way you say a word you're about to correct. I turned from the counter where I was packing my lunch. There's a charge here from last Thursday, Barnes & Noble. $14.99. He turned the tablet toward me as if presenting evidence. I bought a book. For the reading group at work. They do it twice a year. He set the tablet down. We've talked about discretionary spending. It was $15, Gerald. That's not the point. The point is, you didn't ask. I stood there with my lunch bag in my hand and something moved through me. Not anger exactly, not yet, more like recognition, the slow, sickening click of a thing becoming undeniable. I'm 62 years old, I said. I've been a nurse for 31 years. I bought a book. He looked at me with an expression I had seen before, patient and disappointed and slightly above it all. We'll discuss this tonight, he said, when you're not rushing. I went to work. I moved through my shift the way I always did, competent and present, taking vitals and updating charts and listening to Dr. Okafor's morning rounds. But underneath everything, that click kept sounding. During my lunch break, I sat in the stairwell between the second and third floors and called David. He picked up on the second ring. Mom, you okay? It's the middle of the day. I'm fine. I wanted to hear your voice. There was a pause. He knew something was wrong. David had always been perceptive. What happened? I almost said nothing. The word was right there, automatic. Ready. Instead, I said, your father told me I needed permission to buy a book. Silence on the other end. Then, Mom, how long has this been going on? I didn't answer right away because I was doing the math in my head, and the number that came back was larger than I'd let myself acknowledge. 4 years, I finally said. Maybe 5, I heard him exhale. I need you to talk to someone. Not me. Someone who can actually help. There's an organization. I looked it up after Christmas because I was worried. It's called New Horizons. They work with women in your situation. Will you just look them up? I wrote the name on the back of my hospital ID lanyard with a pen from my pocket. New Horizons. Greensboro office. I went back to my shift. I finished the day. I drove home, made dinner, let Gerald explain to me for 40 minutes why discretionary spending was a partnership decision. I nodded. I said the right things. But that night after he fell asleep, I took out my phone in the bathroom with the fan running and I found the New Horizons website. I read for 45 minutes. Financial abuse, coercive control, isolation, economic entrapment. There was a checklist. I had 11 of the 14 indicators. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and read that checklist 3 times. The next morning, before my shift, I drove to the New Horizons office on Green Street. It was in a small building next to a dry cleaner, easy to miss. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes before I went in. The woman at the front desk had reading glasses on a beaded chain and a comb that felt practiced in the best possible way. She asked my name and I gave it, and she made a call, and 4 minutes later I was sitting across from a woman named Beverly. Beverly was somewhere in her early 50s, with short, natural hair and the kind of directness that some people mistake for coldness. It isn't coldness, it's respect. She looked at me, and she didn't look away, and she didn't tilt her head in pity, and she didn't say, "Oh, honey," the way people say it when they can't think of anything useful. She said, "Tell me what's been happening." So I told her. I told her about the debit card and the account and the book and the stairwell phone calls and the 5 years of explaining myself, the fabric scissors, the hand lotion I'd stopped buying, the way I'd become a smaller and smaller version of myself without quite noticing until I was nearly gone. Beverly listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "What you're describing is financial abuse and coercive control. Those are real things with real legal definitions, and you have options, more than you probably think right now." I started crying. Not the polite kind of crying, but the kind that comes from somewhere you've kept sealed for a long time. Beverly handed me a box of tissues and waited. "What kind of options?" I asked when I could speak again. She explained it carefully. I had 32 years of marriage, a shared house, shared retirement accounts, my own professional income. I had rights to all of it. A legal separation would give me immediate access to emergency support. A divorce would entitle me to a significant share of our joint assets. I was not, despite 5 years of believing otherwise, trapped. But she also said, before anything legal, you need to be safe. And safe means a plan. Over the following 8 weeks, I went to see Beverly every Tuesday and Thursday morning before my shifts. I told Gerald I was doing a professional development course at the hospital. He verified this once. Called the hospital's education office, because of course he did, and a colleague named Fran, who knew exactly what was happening because I had finally told one human being the truth, confirmed it without missing a beat. I owe Fran more than I can say. The plan Beverly and I built was methodical and careful. First, documents. My birth certificate and social security card were in a lockbox in Gerald's closet. He kept the key on his actual key ring, which he kept in his pocket. I needed to get copies without him knowing. The county clerk's office on Elm Street could issue certified copies of both for a small fee, but I needed a credit card he didn't know about to pay for them, which meant I needed a new account, which meant I needed a mailing address he didn't control. Beverly arranged for a P.O. box through the center. I opened it on a Tuesday using my hospital ID as identification. Then I opened a new savings account at a credit union 3 miles from the hospital, had the statements sent to the P.O. box, and began making small cash withdrawals from my paycheck, each one below the amount Gerald reviewed daily. $20 here, $30 there. Beverly had a name for this, building a safety fund. I had another name for it, breathing. Second, I needed the documents themselves. I went to the county clerk's office on a morning Gerald thought I was getting an oil change. I paid the fees with cash I'd accumulated. I had certified copies of my birth certificate, social security card, nursing license, and our marriage certificate in my hands within 40 minutes. I put them in a plain envelope and locked them in my locker at the hospital. Third, I needed somewhere to go. Beverly connected me with a woman named June, who ran a transitional residence for women on the east side of the city. It wasn't a shelter, it was a large ranch house on a quiet street, 4 private bedrooms, a shared kitchen, and a backyard with a bird feeder that June refilled every morning with an attention that told you something about how she ran everything else. June charged $300 a month, which was less than what I paid in tolls and parking at the hospital. She had 3 other residents when Beverly brought me to meet her. One was a retired librarian named Helen. One was a woman about my age named Constance who laughed at everything and was learning to drive for the first time at 64. I knew before I left that day that I could stay there. I went home and started thinking about what to take. It was less than I expected. My nursing certifications, the original documents now hidden in my hospital locker. 2 sets of work scrubs. My mother's strand of pearls that I'd hidden in a tampon box in the back of the bathroom cabinet because Gerald had once suggested I sell them. A photograph of David and Paul at Christmas 1987 sitting on the stairs in matching pajamas, grinning. My father's pocket knife, which I'd carried since he died and which Gerald always said was an odd thing for a woman to carry. My good stethoscope. Littman Cardiology, 22 years old, my name engraved on the bell. A sweater Paul had given me 3 birthdays ago that still smelled faintly of the cedar drawer it had been folded in. All of it fit in a large canvas tote bag from the hospital gift shop. I thought about that for a long time. 62 years. Everything that was truly mine fit in a bag I'd gotten free at a nursing conference. The day I left was a Thursday in April. Gerald had a standing appointment every Thursday afternoon. A poker game at his friend Mitchell's house in Summerfield that ran from 1 in the afternoon until whenever. He'd been going for 6 years. It was the one thing in his week I could count on down to the minute. That morning, I made breakfast like always. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. Gerald ate and read the news on his tablet and complained about something the city council had decided. I washed the dishes. I packed his poker snacks into a Ziploc bag the way he liked. I handed them to him at the door. "Drive safe," I said. He took the bag without looking up from his phone. "Yeah," he said. I washed his car back out of the driveway. I watched it reach the stop sign at the end of our street and turn right. I counted to 60. Then I got the tote bag from under the bathroom sink where I'd been keeping it for a week, checked that I had everything, and called Fran. She was waiting at the end of the block in her Subaru. She had a travel mug of coffee and a cup holder for me, which made me cry in a way I wasn't prepared for. "You doing okay?" she asked. I looked at our house through the passenger window. The brick front and the crepe myrtle I planted 15 years ago that had grown bigger than I planned. The window of the bedroom where I had not slept well in 5 years. "I'm doing better than I've done in a long time," I said. June met us at the door of the ranch house and showed me to my room. It had a window that looked out at the backyard, which is how I immediately knew it was my window, because beyond the bird feeder, there was an enormous oak tree, and the afternoon light came through it in long gold strips across the floor. There was a quilt on the bed in blues and greens, and a small reading lamp on the nightstand. Fran hugged me at the door and said, "Call me for anything. Anything at all," and then she left, and I sat on the edge of that bed in the afternoon light and felt something I didn't have a name for at first. It took me a minute to recognize it. It was quiet. Inside my own body. Quiet. Gerald called Fran 4 times that evening. She didn't answer. He called David, who told him calmly that I was safe and had left voluntarily, and that anything further would need to go through my attorney. Gerald called the police to report me missing. The responding officer, once my attorney, a sharp-minded woman named Caroline Myers, who Beverly had referred me to, faxed a statement of voluntary departure, advised Gerald that I was not missing and that further contact would be documented. According to David, who was present by phone for some of what followed, Gerald spent the first week insisting I had been manipulated by outside influences, that I wasn't mentally well, that this wasn't like me. He told David I had always been unstable. David, who was 35 years old and had spent his childhood watching his father manage his mother, told Gerald quietly that he wasn't going to discuss it. Gerald's attorney sent a letter characterizing my departure as abandonment. Caroline responded with 34 months of financial records documenting the account transfers, the weekly spending limits, the closed accounts, The salary redirection. She included expert documentation on coercive financial control. She included my written account of the restricted phone calls, the monitored texts, the inability to see my sons without supervision. The judge assigned to our case was a man named Honorable James Whitfield, and I want to say this clearly because I know not every woman gets lucky on this point. He read the documentation. He actually read it. At the hearing, when Gerald's attorney tried to characterize the financial arrangement as a mutual agreement I had entered freely, Judge Whitfield asked Gerald directly, "Did your wife have unsupervised access to funds from her own professional income?" Gerald said the money was shared. Judge Whitfield said that wasn't what he asked. He asked it again. The divorce was finalized 9 months after I left. I received half of the retirement accounts, 31 years of contributions, significant. I received my share of the equity in the house, which Gerald sold because he couldn't afford to buy me out. I received spousal maintenance for 4 years, which was the amount of time Caroline calculated it would take me to rebuild my independent financial standing, given the 5 years of salary I had effectively had no access to. I received my nursing license and my 22 years of professional standing, which had never actually been his to take, though it had taken me a long time to remember that. David flew in from Charlotte the weekend after the divorce was final. We sat in June's backyard under the oak tree and ate sandwiches, and he told me about the kids and his job and a trip he'd taken with his wife to Asheville. I told him about Helen, the retired librarian who had become my weekly Scrabble opponent and was undefeated and relentless about it. I told him about Constance, who had passed her driver's test on the second attempt and cried in the driveway for 10 minutes, and then immediately drove to the Dairy Queen on her own. "What are you going to do now?" David asked. I thought about it. I was still working at the hospital. I had money coming in, savings growing, more financial stability than I'd had in years. I could get my own place. I probably should get my own place. But June's backyard with the bird feeder and the oak tree and Helen's ruthless Scrabble strategy and Constance's laugh felt like something I hadn't known I needed until I was inside it. "I think I'm going to stay here a little longer," I said. David nodded like that made perfect sense. I called Paul in Phoenix the following Sunday, from my own phone, from the backyard. Without the fan running or the door closed or one ear on the stairs, he picked up and his voice sounded exactly like it had when he was 12 years old, and I had to sit down on the garden bench because my legs stopped working for a moment. "Mom," he said, "I've been hoping you'd call. We talked for 2 hours. I found out I had a granddaughter I'd never met, his daughter, born 14 months ago, named Rosa. He said he'd tried to reach me, had sent letters that came back unopened. I knew then what had happened to those letters. But knowing didn't make the time back. It only made the forward more precious. Rosa and I met over video call on a Wednesday evening in July. She is 14 months old and has Paul's eyes and an opinion about everything she encounters. I intend to know her for the rest of my life. I started volunteering at the New Horizons Center on the first Tuesday of September. Beverly trained me herself. I sit in the intake room with the plants on the windowsill, and I make the tea, and I listen, and I say the thing that Beverly said to me the first time I walked through that door: "You have options. More than you think right now." Last week, a woman came in, 63 years old, retired school teacher. Her husband had been controlling the finances for 4 years, she said. She kept apologizing, kept saying, "I know it sounds small." She kept saying he never hit me. I moved the tissue box closer to her side of the table. I said, "I know, and I know how big it actually is, and I need you to hear something important. What you're describing has a name, and you have rights, and you are not stuck, even if you can't feel that from where you're sitting right now." She looked at me the way I must have looked at Beverly, like someone reaching for something they're afraid to trust. "I know it's hard to believe right now," I said. "It took me a long time too, but I'm sitting here because someone sat across from me and told me the truth, and the truth is you can leave. You can build something new, and you don't have to do it alone." I still have the campus tote bag I packed the day I left. It's folded in the top drawer of my dresser, underneath the sweater. I kept it because I want to remember the woman who packed it, the woman who stood in her bathroom at 4 in the morning reading a checklist and saw herself, finally and fully, for what was happening. I want to tell her, you were never small. You were just in a small place. And the door was always there. You just needed someone to tell you it wasn't locked. She knows now. We both do.